Hey, welcome back to Blue Memoirs YouTube channel. I'm Amandine, your favorite tea alchemist and self-care queen. Today, I have a very special guest, Eleshia Harris. Eleshia Harris is a business and implementation coach. She helps female business owners get clear on their goals, stay focused, and on track to turn their desires into growth and revenue while harnessing their female cycle. I'm really excited for this conversation where we talk about International Women's Month, self-care at different time of your cycle and seasons of life, the patriarchy, and the importance of advocating for yourself as a woman. First, make sure to subscribe to our lists to get VIP access to our secret tea ceremonies starting next month. And welcome back to Blue Memoirs YouTube channel. Today, a very special episode in honor of International Women's Month and International Women's Day, and our very first guest on the channel. Welcome, Eleshia Harris. Thank you so much for being here, Eleshia.
Thank you so much for having me, Amandine.
So let's
excited.
Me too. So let's jump in. I've obviously given a short introduction, but I want to hear more about you. I want our viewers to hear about you beyond the bio. Tell us everything.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Eleshia. I am a podcast host. I have a podcast called The Eleshia Show. I also have a brand called Eleshia Lifestyle, and I am a holistic business and implementation coach. So I make sure that you do as you say you want to do. So I have clients that always come to me for business growth, and they don't always look at the whole picture. So I'm there to support you with, just looking at your whole life. I have a background in wellness. And so over 20 years ago, I always take a little bit of a pause when I say that, because I'm like, oh my goodness, it was baby Eleshia. So over 20 years ago, I decided that I was really interested in well-being. And my dad at the time said to me, you have to find a job. Well-being is not going to pay the bills, so you have to find a proper job. And so I did. But I went to night school and I studied wellness, and I'm so glad I did, because it has really been helpful throughout my whole career. But all that to say is I decided to take the investment banking project management route as my main career, and well-being has always been my secondary career until I had my baby girl. And now I get to merge both of my worlds into one. And that's why I call myself a holistic business and implementation coach.
I love that. Thank you so much. As you know, the overall arcing theme of this YouTube channel is self-care, right? And there's so many things that you've said I want to pick up on because I love it. And first being, in no particular order, the fact that you were told wellness, well-being is not a career, right? Get a real job. And I see a lot of similarities in our history, I guess, because for a really long time, I went for jobs that I thought I should go for and to make my dad, in particular, my dad proud. And you mentioned you had a realization, right, when you had your baby daughter, Alessandra. Tell me more about that, right? What changed?
So what changed was, what changed was the fact that I couldn't get pregnant. Okay, so when my mum passed away back in 2015, my life just kind of took a a turn, right? You know, I'd literally just lost one of my parents. And I then became a carer to my brother, who's on the autism spectrum, overnight. And I was grieving so badly, but was in full distracted. I was in full distractive mode, where I basically was just trying to distract myself from feeling the inner pain of losing my mum. And so when my husband and I decided that we were going to try for a child the next year, um, it became very apparent after, 6 months to 8 months of trying that something wasn't right. And so because of my age, because, you know, when you're over 30, they start to make you feel like you're old when it comes to, having a child. And so I was 37 at that time. And I went to the doctors, and my doctors said, "Oh, well, let's look into this for you because you may be running out of time." And so that's what happened. I went through all of these tests, and a lot of things came up, Amandine, that I didn't even know. Like I had a blocked fallopian tube, and I had polycystic ovaries, and I had fibroids, and I literally then decided it was time to take my own well-being into my own hands, because the doctors were telling me that I needed to have an operation in order to have a child. So they basically was like, no, it's not going to happen naturally. You're going to have an operation, and then you will have to consider IVF. And because of all of the well-being studies that I had done throughout the course of my life, I just knew that I couldn't just take that for an answer. I knew that I had to look within my own self and be my own detective and start to do the detective work of everything that I had learned over the span of, over a decade. And so that's what I did. And I got pregnant once, and that baby didn't survive. And then after that, I got pregnant again after 6 months of just letting my body rest, working with an acupuncturist, and being very quiet. That was one of the biggest things that really helped was, I'm going to get emotional here, but just letting go of the things that were causing a lot of stress in my life. And that included, family, friends, my role. There's a backstory to my role, but one of the key indicators was that it was time to leave because I wasn't appreciated, and also it was just very timely because of the fact that I wanted a baby more than I wanted six figures, right? So it was time. And so that's what I did. That's what I did.
Thank you for sharing that. Two things from what you said, right? One, I will say that it's so brave what you did in different ways. Firstly, to advocate for yourself when you're talking to, in general, right? That can be a challenge.
Yes.
Especially when you're talking to medical professionals,
yes,
right? Who treat you like you don't know anything, you don't know your own body. And that is something I really want to underline. That is definitely self-care for women, self-care in general, advocating for yourself. Yes. You're the proof that we know our own bodies, that when we listen, there is so much wisdom there. Your story also really resonates, and I encourage people to check out your podcast, The Eleshia Show, because you talk about your story and self-care from a women's cycles perspective, which is also very close to my heart. I was diagnosed with endometriosis about 2 years ago now. And at first I went for what the doctor said. And then a year later, I was like, this doesn't feel right. And I decided to do my own exploration, my own work, listening to my body. And now I'm almost 6 months flare-up free, which is amazing. So yeah. I know how scary it is, especially when people around you, even people who are not doctors, probably, I'm sure they did the same, well-intentioned people were like, no, but you need to do this. You probably, why don't you listen to the doctors? Don't you think they know better? Well, actually, no, they don't, because we know better. We are in our bodies. And also, it's okay to try things out, right? Experiment. I was never closed off to the whole medicine path.
Nor was I.
Yeah, but you want to try because something doesn't feel good anymore. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to try a different way. And we're going to talk about this more because that's also work that you do, right? Working with women to help them live authentically according to their cycle. And I'm very passionate about that work as well. It's so important. And that's how I'm where I am now without the hormonal medication I was taking. It's not even treatment for endometriosis, right? And so that you were diagnosed with all these conditions as well, and that you decided to say, nope, I'm going to do it my way. I think that is so, so brave. And yeah, it's very, very inspiring. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you. And you're right. It's when you're advocating for yourself, it can be very hard and very lonely, right? Because all of the things that you just said happened. And I just want to just clarify, like you said, I wasn't averse to having the operation, but I just knew that I had to try. And so the operation was put back twice. And it's funny because the first day I was supposed to have the operation, the first date I was supposed to have the operation was the date that I was leaving my full-time role. And so I was like, I can't do that because I'm doing handovers and so forth. And then the second date was around when my uncle passed away. And so it got put back twice. And then the third time when I was supposed to go in, I remember them calling me and saying, we're just calling you just to, double check that everything's well for this date. And I said to the receptionist, oh my goodness, I completely forgot to call you. I'm already pregnant. I'm 3 months pregnant. And she was like, wow, like what a gift, but what a gift that we can give your appointment to somebody else. And for me, that was really important as well, because it just made me feel like I did everything that I needed to do for myself in order to get what I wanted. However, there may have been somebody on that waiting list who then got a chance because they had exhausted all of their options as well. So, yeah.
This is also a great reminder that working with your cycle is so many things. It's very holistic because I think a lot of people will think diet or nutrition rather, exercise, maybe supplements. I know I did, right?
Yeah.
But what I see as the key part, and it all works great. You mentioned acupuncture, it all works great. But I think what we don't talk about enough is the part of living in alignment, right, with our true self. And you mentioned leaving your full-time job. That to me is part of that, right? You know that that's not for you anymore and you're going to try something different. That's more in line with who you are and what you want to do in this world.
Yes.
And again, that completely resonates. For me, it may have been, well, it was also that, by the way, but more recently, speaking my truth in very different situations, even when it's super uncomfortable. I always say it's a lot easier, I think, to speak up with new friends who know you as you are now, with strong boundaries, and you're the CEO and stuff. But the friends that you've had for a long time, or worse, family, right, that have known you maybe as a pushover, for me, let's say it.
Yeah.
It's hard to be like, oh, wait, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. And people are like, oh, they don't like this.
Yes. They don't know
of you.
They don't like the new boundary setting, go-getting, amazing Amandine, because they're like, who is this? Who are you?
Yeah, this is not convenient. I don't like this. But that's very key. I think that was a really big part of the work. And I used to think me feeling better and having pain-free period and cycle was due to doing more yoga and eating better, eating less meat, and all these things. And I think it really all works. The CBD I take, etc. But sometimes, alcohol intake, that's a big one for me. But then there were months or periods where I was like eating lots of meat again, or drinking more alcohol, and I was like, oh, I'm really worried. This is going to be way more painful than it needs to be again. And then no, it wasn't. And that was because the nutrition and the exercise and all these other things can vary, and it does, right? We're all human. We have cycles, not just in our bodies, in our life seasons, etc. But the whole work of staying true to myself and remaining in alignment with what matters to me, that stayed. And yes, of course, that fluctuates too, but the core things really stayed without it being work anymore. And I really believe that makes me like flare up free, pain free right now.
Yeah. It all works together. And I think what you just said is so important, because, for me now, really listening to my body and following my intuition, but also tapping into my cycle and really harnessing the energy that it brings is so important. And I started this when I was trying to conceive, right? I needed to know when was the best time that, to have sex, because I wanted to conceive. So I had to really consider that. But also it made me really look at my energy. And so everything you just mentioned about the food and the nutrition and the movement and the sleep patterns and hydration, all of that counts. However, society makes you feel like your cycle is a burden. Oh goodness, you see the ads. Oh my goodness, it's that time of month again. What can we do to suppress it? But how about if you lean into it? It's giving you so much information that for me, it just helps me to move forward in my lifestyle, in my business. I now use it as something that I now use it as a tool to run my business. I know that if I am, bleeding, if I'm on my bleed, then that's not a great time to put in meetings that or make huge decisions in my business. That's not a time. Yeah, that's not a time for me to be pushing through. That's a time for me to be resting and reflecting on the things that I may want to do over the course of the other phases. And so it's been vital for me to build my business this way, because I'm not just a business owner. I'm Eleshia. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a carer. And by running my business this way, it has been so beneficial.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I love that. I find that getting to know our cycle and harnessing that power also gives us permission, right? We live in a world where it's all go, go, go. For those of you watching who don't know, women have a around 28-day cycle, unlike men who work on a 24
Yes.
hour cycle. And our society is very much patriarchal, and based on that, we can't show up every day and give you the exact amount of energy, and we're not supposed to. But because we try to push it so much, and I did for years, this is where we get burnout, depression, all these things.
Yeah.
And working with our cycles, and it has been for me anyway, it feels like I'm being given permission, or even better, I'm giving myself permission to rest when I need to go out there and shine when I need to.
Exactly.
And very interesting, today's the full moon, right?
Yes.
Like only a couple hours ago, and we're recording this. Tomorrow's International Women's Day. I'm loving this overall theme, but when you start digging into your cycle and your different phases and levels of energies, it liberates you, right?
Yes, it does.
And it helps you plan, and I love that stuff. I mean, you're a project manager.
Yes,
I'm sure you love it too, but I love
it.
Being able to look ahead and be like, okay, that week I'm going to do lots of meeting, and that week I'm going to do 0 meeting.
Yes.
And I love that, and that's okay. We don't need to be talking to people every day. We don't need to be going out every day. We don't need to be eating the same every day. This is also something I really notice in my cycle, right? There's times when I'm really hungry and times not. And that's fine. You know, I've stopped trying to police this stuff because I know that my body needs different things, and my body also looks differently at different time of the months, right? And that's normal. That's literally healthy. It's how we work, and that is okay. So
all the yeses. I love that you just said that last sentence about the body, because I think, again, society has made us feel like we have to look the same and always be what's the word?
100%. Right?
Always be all showy, all singing, all dancing, and and no, we don't. We don't. And I really recognized, and no offense to the men, but I recognized that for me, I had to start listening to some of the women in my industry who talked about productivity and so forth, because they understood what I was going through a little bit more. And I love, there were lots of males in the industry that I still love, but I can't wake up and do a workout at 5 o'clock in the morning.
I was about to use that example. And you don't, it's not even you can't, because you
don't want to.
Right? Who wants that? I will never be that person who wakes up at 5 a.m. Like I want to work late because that's when I'm creative, and that's okay. I also want to see my family, my friends, or just hang out with my cat if I want to, and not be cramming all these things in one day just because that's supposedly the way to success. Like, no.
No. So when I'm building out my week, I've got 2 days that I work condensed days, because I've been working around my daughter for the last four and a bit years, right? And so there's a Tuesday and a Thursday that I do condensed hours. And yes, I do have back-to-back meetings. However, there is always space in between. I always give myself some white space to be able to do something. So my Tuesdays and Thursdays look very busy, but then throughout the rest of the week, I have all of this space, and I'm still being productive, because when you have a time frame that you need to get something done in, you'll be surprised how much you can get done if you just have that focus and that clarity. And I think just working with your cycle and your energy levels, that's really important, because I know now this week I'm chatty patty. I am in the full moon kind of vibe. I am in the follicular phase of my cycle, and so I know my energy is rising to ovulation, which is summertime for me. And so, like you said, I'm doing all of my interviews, I'm doing all of my networking in this week and into next week, because I'm ready to show up, and I can articulate myself. Whereas sometimes towards, you know, a few days before my period, I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to lie down on the sofa and watch Netflix.
Yes.
That's what I want to do.
I have to say.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to specify, it's also okay to work loads when we want to and feel like it, because there's a time for that in the months, right? And for me, it's right after my period.
Yeah.
For most people, right? Sometimes I want to work at the weekend. I don't want to stop working at night. And it's not because I'm being forced to or because I think I should. It's because I'm in the zone and I want to take advantage of that. And this is usually the moment when I'll be ticking off admin stuff I've been putting off all months, right? So that's the time I want to use and harness. I love that word that you use. Harness that specific energy at that time, because I know that for the rest, there'll be another time it's coming. And the beautiful thing with a cycle, right? It's keeps coming round. So there's always enough time. There's always more of that energy that's coming later. And embracing that, I think, makes the whole journey so much more enjoyable. And when we try to do, even when, let's take the opposite example we normally hear, right? Imagine you're in that super productive phase that I just mentioned. And I mean, that happens to me all the time. If I try to watch Netflix or do nothing, I'm going to get frustrated because my whole body is like, no, this is not the time. This is not the time. You either go for a walk or do something or have a dance and then come back and do things, right? It just doesn't feel right. And when we're working with what does feel right for us, for our bodies, it's just like this analogy of swimming upstream, right? It's like we're finally letting go. And instead of trying so hard to put in things that we need to do, then we just let go and let it flow.
Yes. Yeah. Let it flow. Let it flow. Basically, for the podcast, me and my wonderful friend, Mary Taylor, we did a whole 6 weeks series.
I love that.
You know, on the female cycle and just how to, you know, to live in flow. And then off the back of that, I decided to do a whole course that really digs even deeper into all of this information, because I just think it's key. And me being a mum to, you know, a 4-year-old at this precise moment, it's important for me to model for her. So I don't want her to see me pushing through. I don't want her to see me having to work, you know, wake up early to work or work really late at night always, just to be able to do everything. And I also want to talk to her about periods, because my mum, bless her, she never talked to me about periods because she just didn't. And she didn't talk to me about her perimenopause or her menopause symptoms because she just didn't. And for me, it's really important that I share all of this information with Alessandra, because she's going to go through it.
Yes.
And I want her to be equipped.
And it's really this, I think, this previous generation, it's this thing you don't talk about, and we're ashamed and like, oh my God, let's hide our tampons and things. Well, literally half the population goes through that every month, right? For most of their lives, but let's not talk about it. And again, this is the patriarchy taking over, right? And making women feel inadequate because of this. And then, so we all pretend it's not happening, keep pushing and pushing and working and working and working. So that it doesn't make men uncomfortable. Honest. And so, yes, to telling your daughter about this, like, yes, this is so important.
I mean, I remember when I was in the corporate world, I had some amazing women bosses. And then I noticed that they were teetering out when they became a certain age. And I was just like, but why? And now it's only now that I'm going through, you know, my life cycle as well, I'm recognizing that some of them were just going through, perimenopause and menopause and not being able to talk about it and just suffering. And so again, I don't want anybody to suffer. So that's the whole reason why I talk about all of the things that people think are taboo. I'll talk about it on the podcast, but in the work that I do as well, Amandine, because it's so important for us as women to recognize that why should we suppress who we really are?
Yeah. And we should be supported, I really believe. And I know the conversation is happening more and more, with Scotland being the first country to offer free
sanitary package.
Yes, thank you. With Scotland offering free sanitary pads and tampons to their population. But it just feels logical to me. This is health. This is wellness. This is, again, half the population. We're finally introducing in certain countries and organizations leave for period pain. And we're having conversations now about perimenopause and menopause because it's finally becoming more talked about. And it's not that people didn't know before. Like, let's be honest, there's always been doctors and stuff, but it's finally okay to talk about and acknowledge that it can really get in the way of your, again, productivity, because you're going through some major changes. And it is, to me, very normal that we would implement solutions for women who go through these changes. And I'm very glad that we're having this conversation. And this is only one of those differences, right? And things that are brought up during this month, and why it's so important to keep having these conversations, because it makes such a difference. Imagine your budget if you got tampons and sanitary towels for free, right? I mean, you're a woman, it's a budget every month. I use CBD tampons, for example. That's also even more expensive. And that just makes the poverty gap even larger.
It does. Yeah. I mean, I've switched to, I use my Moon Cup now, and I use period pants. Oh my goodness. Like, those have changed my life. But that's just a new thing. So thousands spent. Thousands spent. It's only been in the last 3 or 4 years that I made the switch.
Yes. And talking of period pants, right? I've also recently discovered them, and I was like, how the fuck did I go without for my whole life? This is insane. But it's an investment, right? It's on average 30, 35 euros. For one, yes, you use it for ages, but this is something that I think should be covered by our healthcare, right? I mean, it's literally health. So,
wow.
Yeah, this is an important conversation to have. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's important because I'm hoping that by the time Alessandra starts to go through her cycle, then she'll be able to wear period pants and so forth without feeling weird about that. So that's another reason why I'm modeling for her now, is because I want all of these things to be a norm.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the many reasons we are changing the world with our businesses. Because we get that. And therefore, the women that we work with, we can extend that compassion, right? And I mean, I'd love to offer this kind of benefits, right? And I don't necessarily think companies should be the ones providing it, but we can do that, right?
What a good idea.
Right? Well, the governments get their shit together.
That is such a good idea, because, sometimes I do gift packages for my one-on-one clients.
Yes.
What a good idea.
See? Yeah,
Yeah.
you didn't come for nothing.
No.
So
Oh,
I want to
goodness.
ask you, this is rant I have regularly to talk about how self-care is so personal and changes so much depending on the person and then depending on our own cycle, definitely, and season of life, of the year, etc. So I want to ask you, we talked about that big transition in your life, right, with your diagnosis and you trying to conceive. And for our viewers that might be in that position, tell me what self-care looked like for you at that time. And then
Oh,
I want to talk about how it looks like for you today.
yes. Oh, what a great question. Okay, so whew, where do I start? I literally gave up all of the things. My friends thought I was crazy because I gave up my job, and
Big
some of
one.
my yeah, that was a huge one because some of my friends were like, what? What do you mean? How are you going to fund yourself? And that was taking a huge risk on myself. Um, but I always had an A, B, and C plan, and we'll talk about that in a second. But then it was doing lots of research into the things that could really help to shrink my fibroids. And so I gave up dairy, I gave up red meat. I ensured that I was taking good supplements. I slept when I needed to sleep. I stopped drinking. I stopped partying late. I did the things that served me in that time. And I kind of shut out everything and everybody. Sorry to say, well, not really sorry because I've got
No.
Alexandra now, but I shut out any negative speak or anything negative around me. I stopped watching the news. I stopped reading the newspapers. I was just in my own little well-being bubble, Amandine, because I was just like, this is what I want. And so I have to give myself the optimum chance to be able to get it.
Yes. And that was self-care for you at the time, meaning that's what your body, yourself needed, and you
Yeah.
gave yourself that, and you don't have to apologize for that.
No, no. And then I did cleanses. I cleansed my body. I started to work with the acupuncturist. And when I say we were both shocked within 6 weeks of working with him that I was pregnant, that's when I miscarried that baby. But he was like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I am pregnant." And so just by doing all of those things, it worked. And I didn't find it that hard because I could see the end goal, right? And I don't know if that is my project management head. I always look at the end goal. I've got that futuristic kind of mindset where that's where I'll go, end goal, and then work backwards. But I knew deep down that I was going to have a baby. And so I had immense faith in myself and so I had immense faith in myself and I was listening internally. And if I needed to sleep, I needed to sleep. If I needed to eat, I needed to eat. I advocated for myself, like you said. I took that time to really look after myself, massages, facials, just really look after Eleshia. And if I'm really honest, I hadn't done that for a long time. Like I had looked after my mum throughout her whole cancer journey, and I would continue to work because I had to, financially I had to. And prior to that, I was in a really high stressed job, and I was buying an apartment, and so I was working all the hours. And then after my mum passed away, I went straight into looking after my brother. So I hadn't given myself that full, I hadn't given myself time to really take care of Eleshia for a very long time. So that's what I did. I went all in.
Yeah.
All in.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love
And
it.
then what self-care looks like for me now is,
I'm just going to interrupt you 1 second. I just
yeah,
want to remind anyone who's watching about your course to harness the female cycle. The link is in the description below, so go check it out. I forgot to mention that before, and it's so important because you go over all these different elements that we talked about, right?
I do.
So check it out. Thank you for sharing that. I love that because on paper, I think it's self-care is simple. It's literally, what do I need? Let me give myself that. I know it's more complicated. I love that you had a goal, and for you that kept you going. And probably after a while, I mean, at first, I think we can really resist self-care, like we can resist good things for us. But then your body probably was like, oh, actually, that feels nice, you know?
So
and
good.
so that kept you going, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I knew that if I visualized having this baby girl, right? I knew she was going to be a girl. I visualized who she was going to look like. You know, I just knew that this is who I was going to have. I didn't ask any questions when it came to scans, because I knew deep down I didn't want to know that it was a boy or a girl, because I knew.
So you didn't know until the birth?
No, but I knew.
Well, you knew, but I mean, you didn't have that confirmation. Oh,
No.
I love that.
No. I knew and we had one girl's name and one boy's name, and I knew it wasn't going to be a boy. So I had one name. And that was it. And so when I did get confirmation, that made me really, really thank myself for really knowing who I was and am, because I believed in myself 100%. I knew that I was going to get what I needed if I just took care of myself. And I knew that I was going to have a girl because that's what I believed. And I think that is a really important thing to remember, is you have all of the answers within.
I was about to say, it just shows the power of our inner voice, our inner knowing, right? And you listened, and that's it.
Yeah. And so now it's difficult, right? Because as a parent, sometimes you second guess yourself. And I'm now coming back to myself. I mean, we've had a good couple of years of the whole world being upside down. And so in that time, I really had to be mindful of my own self-care, because I had to look after my family, you know? And so Pilates is a non-negotiable. I'm a Pilates teacher.
Yes, tell us about this machine. We can see that.
Yeah, this is a reformer behind me, and it saved me when my mum passed away. Pilates saved me when my mum passed away, and it saved me when I was going through my miscarriage and the aftermath, because I was really sad. I was still hopeful, but I was really sad. And it also saved me through 2020 and beyond. And so for me, it's been an integral part of my life. I'm very lucky that I have an amazing support group around me who are Pilates teachers as well. And so my Pilates teacher, Brooke Seiler, she is absolutely amazing. And when we were going through everything that we did go through in 2020 and beyond, I don't want to use the word because I'm like, that's in the past, you know, we're talking future state. But
what happened in 2020? No.
Yeah. But I had my own equipment, and she wanted us all to work on the same equipment. So she kindly sent me her equipment on loan to work on, and we have been working on our Pilates journey for the last 3 years now. There's 4 of us, and we meet every Tuesday and Thursday, and we work out together, and that has helped us all just really stay within ourselves. And so I'm super grateful for all of those ladies who turn up for each other week in, week out, like without fail. We turn up for each other, and I think that is really important, to have a community.
Yes. And I love that. I love that at that previous time of your life that we talked about, you needed to be alone to get rid of the noise, right? And now in this time of your life, community is self-care. Yes. And that's okay, right? Sometimes we do need to retreat. And also I believe that sometimes, like you did, we need to strip everything off. Yes. So we can rebuild on more fertile ground like you did. And now you have people in your life, from what I understand, that enrich you and empower you and support you, which is not something that you had back then, right? And you couldn't have gotten to where you are now without doing that whole alignment work. And yes, sometimes it's sad. And I mean, I still go through this, and it's hard to let go sometimes, but this is how we keep following what is within, right? That inner wisdom, because we know when something's not really aligned. We just sometimes ignore it. We choose to ignore it for years because we don't want to hurt people's feelings, or it's not convenient, or whatever, right?
Yes. That's a whole different conversation. Like, we need to get into that in another conversation, because you're so right. And I think, for me, it was my mum passing away showed me a lot. It taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about the people around me. It taught me that I had to look after myself, because my mum was 56 when she passed away. And so, I want to be here. And so my body gives me warnings, right? Like late last year, I thought I was okay, but I ended up with a whole full body rash, and I had to stop and actually take heed on what was going on. I was doing all of the things, but my body still needed me to slow down. And that was its way of showing me that I need to slow down. And so, I've dialed up my health and well-being perspective even more so than what I was doing previously. And so one of the things that I'm doing more is juicing every day. Like, I love juice, but now juicing every day is important for me to get in my vitamins and my nutrients. And so I had to buy a new juicer to do that, because I needed it to be easy. But then I've got a little bit of skin on my chest that flares up every time I'm stressed, to remind me. Yes. Or anytime I eat something that doesn't agree with me, because I'm becoming more vintage. That's how I like to say that I'm aging. And so hormonally, I'm changing every day, and we have to recognize that.
Yes.
And that
adapt, right?
And adapt.
Accordingly. Yes.
And adapt. And so that's been really, really important to me, that I'm on this new discovery again, because my body is changing. And so today I didn't feel that strong within my body. However, Brooke turned around and said to me, "Oh my goodness, Eleshia, whatever you're doing, continue to do it." She said that juicing is working for you, because you look, and your movement when you're doing your Pilates reformer, it looks so strong. And I was like, thank you, because sometimes, like I said, I didn't feel strong, but what I'm doing is helping.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes you need a mirror, right?
You need a mirror to be able to say, hey, you know, you're doing great.
Yes. And I think this is another reason why this conversation is so important. I do think there is change in the world, right? Because we keep having these conversations.
Yes.
You mentioned your mom, and I mean, women traditionally are caretakers, right?
Yes.
And probably she, you know, never gave herself the permission to care for herself, right? And that breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And but you're changing that for yourself and for your daughter and generations to come, and having this conversation as well. This is important because it's health, but I always say self-care to me is so much more than health, but it all comes down to ourselves and our body and living in alignment and whatever that means. And we don't think, oh, saying no is not health. Well, we don't think saying no is health. It is. It literally is, right? So yes, thank you for sharing that part of your story, because it's a sad yet powerful reminder that everything that we do, and when we has an impact, everything that we do has an impact on ourselves. And when we don't listen, when we ignore these signals, and I love that our bodies has these ways, like it's this skin here that flares up. For me, it's different things. Everyone's different, but when we start to listen, we can't ignore it anymore. And that's the whole point, because we're not meant to.
Right. Yes.
Thank you. Like that's I think a great
pleasure.
place to conclude. Like we are not meant to ignore these signals.
Yes. I'm on a mission. As I said, I'll talk about this particular subject for the rest of my life, because it's really key and it's important, and I need people to recognize that they're not alone, and especially people that look like me, that there is a community out here of people that are waiting open arms to support you, you know? And so
yes. And
find your
for saying that, for adding that as well, because while we're in the middle of International Women's Month, it's important to also recognize the disparities within the group, within women, right? And we already talked about like the poverty gap, but there are many nuances. And I'm so glad that you came here today to talk with me about this. Thank you. I'm so honored. And I know you'll be back, because we have so much more to talk about. But thank you. You're right. And thank you for this reminder of community.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was really good.
Yes. And thank you so much for watching. You have all of Eleshia's details right down below. Please go follow her, connect with her, buy her course, listen to her podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Eleshia.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.